the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Welcome again to the podcast. We are continuing our month-long run of scary movie, horror movie genre related films. We just did Pet Sematary last time, and now we're moving. This is one that's not quite a horror movie. It's more on a comedy base, but it toes a good
comedy, horror, true crime,
and that is John Waters' 1994 movie Serial Mom.
We love it.
And you actually, what movie were we going to do? Or we were thinking about Amityville Horror.
We were.
And I was feeling like, I don't know, I started feeling indifferent about it, and then you texted me and said, what about Serial Mom? And
you're like, okay, it clicks now. This is going to fit more in with what we're going for. Not that there's anything wrong with Amityville Horror, and there's certainly a lot to talk about with that, but it just felt like for this go around, Serial Mom was a nice, kind of with all the movies that we've have done or planning to do for October. The idea of putting Serial Mom in here is kind of one maybe you wouldn't necessarily visit during October, but it fits.
Yeah, it fits. It's kind of, and it's sort of it's a precursor to Scream almost. Like there's not only having the same one of the same actors, but that fine line of a mix of comedy and horror and
true events.
Yeah, true events, self-awareness.
Yes.
So, Lindsay, this was kind of your influence here on us doing Serial Mom. So what was the initial spark here for you wanting to talk about Serial Mom?
For me, what will always sell this movie is Kathleen Turner for me. But I think in the context of putting this movie in October with other Halloween or with other, scary or horror themed movies, one thing that works with this one is that it's not a horror comedy. It's more of a comedy horror, which I like. And when done well, and sometimes it's really, in other movies, it's not done well at all. This one completely works. I think that it is just a solid movie all throughout, and one of my favorite John Waters movies in general. As far as the horror aspect of it, it does this thing of extrapolating the comedy out of these incredibly horrific murders that happen committed by a suburban mom. These are things that, if you look at it, it's not funny. It's really not funny at all. It's totally terrifying. This woman that is probably a sociopath. It is, I think, just very artfully and skillfully done. And to me, is maybe a movie that isn't talked about as much as it should be, and definitely not when it came out. There are just so many reasons to talk about this movie, not only John Waters and the cast. There are just so many topics you can talk about with this movie. And, I mean, really, it's funny, but there are many times that I feel like, damn, that ain't pretty.
Right.
She's kind of terrifying, actually.
I think there's a lot. You're right. There's like a lot of good things to discuss. One of the main things, because as soon as you mentioned this movie, I was like, oh man, I really forgot how much I enjoyed Serial Mom, and I hadn't seen it in a while. And within the first 20 minutes, it was like, wow, this is was so ahead of its time and so relevant. I mean, especially how popular true crime is. I mean, true crime was popular then, but now it's like one
huge.
Of how many documentaries and
podcasts
it's very, very popular
and
in pop culture
because
it is so fascinating. Yeah,
it's interesting.
And I think that this one was ahead of its time. Like, it really tapped into our obsession early on with serial killers and crime in horrific things happening to people that seem somewhat normal, living these normal suburban lives.
Yeah.
And I just really love its style, the way it approaches the subject. I think John Waters really has like a knack for tapping into the cracks of the suburban demise.
Who really does. John Waters has a knack for many things. And I think that there is nothing that's more horrific to the general population than something that is normal and commonplace and maybe like, classic 1950s style American life, than to have that completely obliterated by, mom being a complete murderer.
Yeah.
So it's adding this comedy into something that is pretty horrific.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit about on the podcast today, we'll talk a little bit about sort of how this works is it sort of blends these genres and actually makes it work.
Yeah.
I know you want to talk about Kathleen Turner.
Okay. I'm sorry. I love her.
We'll talk about the cast. This is a great cast. Everybody work functions in such a insanely great way.
And we've got, there's a lot of people to talk about. Mink Stoll, we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll talk about John Waters' career and the place of this movie in his career.
And also with true crime, where this fits in historically.
Yeah.
To kind of, it was the kickoff.
Yeah.
A lot for where our obsession began.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. Before, I'm going to go to a clip here for Serial Mom, but before that, will you just give us a brief thing?
Of course. So this sweet suburban mom, even though we learn in the first 3 minutes we have some good foreshadowing that there's something dark behind her eyes, this sweet suburban mom takes a little too much defense in for her family and anyone who wrongs her family, or her for that matter. She takes it a little too far in each one of these cases. I think our body count's like maybe 7 or 8, if I remember correctly.
Very respectable body count.
Yeah, we're not just talking like 1 or 2 here. Kathleen Turner, if you didn't know, she can play a heinous murderer.
Yeah.
I can't help but laugh every time I think about this movie. There's so many great one-liners.
Yeah. Well, I'll try to find one of those one-liners, and we'll go to that, and then we'll start talking about Serial Mom.
Maybe the ultimate prank call. Maybe not. That might not be appropriate. I don't know.
If I want to fly. I don't know. We'll see.
Whatever.
I'll find something.
Okay.
Then we'll come back.
Okay.
Wait for me, boys. Here, all rinsed and ready to recycle.
Morning, Miss Sutton.
Good morning, guys. Good morning, Soppy. You boys work so hard for the environment, I thought I'd bring you something. Little drink never hurt anybody.
Thank you, ma'am. Damn, that's good stuff.
You believe that goddamn litter bugger?
Oh, I have told her and told her. It takes 90 to 100 years for a tin can to decompose, and she still won't recycle.
Cost the taxpayers millions of dollars last year, but she don't care nothing about the national budget.
I hate Mrs. Ackerman.
I hate her, too.
I hate her guts. Somebody ought to kill her.
Yeah. Give her a happy face, and then recycle her.
For the sake of this planet, somebody just might.
So Serial Mom, I think, so this movie to me is kind of like a perfect satire. And I think satire is a very hard genre or entity to perfect, especially if you're not dealing with something broad that enough people know about what's going on. And I almost feel like this movie has aged so well as a satire because, and this is something that isn't a big secret, John Waters has mentioned this in multiple interviews about Serial Mom, that this predated the O.J. Simpson incident, trial,
which is
everything.
crazy.
Like the movie came out like 3 months before.
It's so crazy
everything
because
happened.
It mirrors a lot that happened.
Yeah,
with
it's
that.
just that there's a parallel with the trial. There's a parallel with people's obsession with the trial,
with marketing.
And that you have a incident that happens or you have a figure who is like O.J. Simpson, who is American icon, just the poster of like what
you would never
everybody
imagine
loves,
him doing anything.
And parallels like Kathleen Turner's serial mom is, the suburban housewife who is, the perfect wife, raises her kids. Like you would never suspect that
she'd never hurt a fly like she does in the first 2 minutes of the movie.
So it's there's so many parallels. It's almost, that's like the eeriest thing. When I was rewatching it, it was kind of like blowing my mind nonstop. And I do think that this movie functions as like, I don't know that there's like another satirical film that I love more. I think that John Waters, he has that knack. I mean, I think this is one of his strongest films, and I think that everything that he built on that, finding the cracks within what the majority of people find to be what is considered normalcy, like finding the cracks within that, and then like showing the interweb of like, the dark side of like what this like perfect life is. And then I feel like this movie, he like really it just feels like it's like he had a lot of fun, and everybody feels like this is a fun film. I mean, I know there's a lot of heinous things that happen in it, but this is a fun film to watch. I think it's really, it's a really smart movie. And I think even now more, it's just, to me, it's another one of those movies I think has aged so well, because now, and even then, I mean, there's been all these cases, there's been so many cases in American history that the public has been completely obsessed with. But I think the O.J. Simpson case was one that was when you look at a timeline of like where really things really kicked in. So it's wild how much is parallel something that happened, but this was ahead of its time.
There's so many examples that we have now. I mean, this is 1994. This is like over 20 years later. We have so many examples of how this movie plays out. We have person that you would never think would commit this heinous crime, whether it be a mom, or a spouse or a celebrity, and then you're faced with this giant media obsession, then a trial, the marketing, everything. And I think, that has a lot to do with how media has changed, how things have become more accessible, information has become more accessible, and we get to a point where it's hard to not necessarily differentiate between, but we don't really, like, where does the story, quote unquote, separate from reality, the reality of the situation, and like the reality of serial mom and these people that she murders, like those crimes, they're insane. But the story and what we come out with at the end is like this is this unbelievable story, and you can't believe that she's actually going to get off in the end, and she does.
Yeah.
And yes, it is a movie. This would certainly not happen in reality, but I mean, we've seen it actually play out in real life.
Yeah, and I do like that the film really shows with Kathleen Turner's character how you can feel sympathy for someone. Like, you forget.
Yeah.
You put aside how horrible these crimes are, how horrible the incident that took place was, because you get caught up in the whirlwind of everybody talking about it, or like,
how could this mom do this?
Yeah. And it is something, like, I'll take for example when the not to take this in a dark place, but like when the Boston Marathon happened, I remember like texting with people like, oh man, I mean, they were showing, it was playing out like an action film on the news, and like, people just kind of like updating like, hey, just saw that this happened, and it was you almost like, and this sounds terrible to say, but you like almost forgot about the actual bombing. You were like more wrapped up in,
did somebody mark that I'm saved on Facebook?
Or this manhunt that's taking place.
Yeah.
That's playing out on over 3 days or 4 days or however long it was. And
we see the live action video of someone being run over, and then like, where's that car? Where are they? We're going to go to a helicopter that's tailing.
And so this film, I think it does a great job because it shows you it shows you the crimes committed.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't shy away from the crimes committed, the murders that happen, the killings that happen. But then it immediately, when we go to trial, and that's why I think the film is smart, because it kind of like sets that aside, and now you feel sympathetic, like you feel sympathetic for Kathleen Turner's character, and she and she spins it in the way, I mean, and she is manipulative, but you're like, she's just trying to protect her family, she's just trying, it's like you almost like rationalize with the character, and that's really smart to me. It's really fascinating to me that John Waters was able to write something so relevant and so sharp and ahead of its time.
I think that's one of the reasons why this works so well, is because as an audience, we see all of these murders happen. There is no question in our mind that Beverly Sutphin, kills all of these people. But then when we get to the trial and she ends up defending herself, and she making these very basic arguments or discrediting witnesses, you're like, well, I mean, she got a point. I mean, they're not going to prove it, beyond a reasonable doubt, not there, so I mean, in the end, you are rooting for the person full well committed all of these crimes, and I think another, like you said, defending her family, I feel like another reason this works is because of even though they might be completely ludicrous reasons why she's defending her family, or why she was offended, and why she's committed these crimes, I think we're left to be like, well, she did have some justification.
Yeah. Well, I like to actually move into speaking of that, and also what you were saying earlier about the foreshadowing with the fly.
Yeah.
Her killing the fly scene is how this movie, I mean, I think it functions perfectly as a satire, but how it functions as sort of a serial killer horror movie.
Yeah. It
has some chilling scenes, and I think... and I know we'll talk about Kathleen Turner, but I think like with the foreshadowing of the fly, we get this, there's a fly, she's cooking breakfast for the family, and a fly lands on the table, and this is in the first 3 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And it annoys her so much, and she like sort of like violently, it's like this sort of like grotesque kill of the fly. Like,
but at the same time, she's holding a complete like normal conversation with her family, and saying like, one of the kids says they hate someone, and she's like, don't use hate, that's a strong word. And at the same time, she's hunting this fly, like trying to kill it.
But then later on, there's just, I feel like that foreshadowing of like, that's how she views these people that bug her, like a fly would bug you. You're swatting them away from your face.
Nuisance.
The foreshadowing is like, she views people as bugs, like she doesn't view them as humans. There's no, if you're someone that loves bugs, but like is a defender of like distinguishing, like, this is a bug, this is a human life, there, if you can say there is a big difference between a bug and a human, but like in her mind they're the same, I mean, if she's killing them, and that's what's chilling in my mind, because there's a part of me of like, I don't really, if I kill a bug, I don't really, like 10 minutes later, it's not really something that I think about, but I feel like if I killed somebody, it'd probably stay with me for the rest of my life. I would hope that it would.
Might stick with you a little bit. Yeah, completely. And I think that one of the most interesting things as far as this, as Beverly Sutphin, serial mom, being a serial killer, is that we have this, we talked a little bit about this before, that I feel that she's not necessarily two different personalities, where she's like this complete sociopath that's like looking to kill people, and then this like sweet suburban mom. These personalities are one. Like she is not two different people during all of this. Okay, the first example that's coming to mind as we're watching this movie right now in the background is when she murders a woman with is that a turkey leg?
I believe it's a lamb.
Lamb, that's
leg.
right. A lamb leg of lamb. She murders this woman with a leg of lamb because she didn't rewind the VHS tape when this woman returned the tape to her son's video store.
Yeah.
And
which is,
I mean,
valid defense, but
you got to rewind,
yeah.
Okay? Or else there's a $1.99 fee, okay? You got to rewind
it.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
So mom finds out about this, is like, you know what? You got to go. In this scene, though, she's looking for a murder weapon to kill this woman, and the woman's dog is coming over to her and hanging out, and she's like, oh, sweetie, giving it little pieces of lamb, like being a sweet suburban mom.
Yeah.
And she's about ready to go murder this woman. However John Waters intended, or whether it was Kathleen Turner, never is there a point in this movie where it seems like two different people.
Yeah.
Even in the end, like the trial scene, we see this perfect blend of her being a sweet suburban mom and also completely manipulating witnesses in front of everyone in the court. And whether this is missed and this is just movie magic, and of course no one would actually see this manipulation, she is consistent throughout the whole movie. And it's almost as if you believe her disbelief that people think that she's a serial killer.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think this movie does a good job of, again, towing that line of our history of like serial killers. A lot of serial killers held regular jobs and held and had
families.
Had families or had normal, friendships with people, but they had this sinister side, this like lust to kill. And I think this movie does a fine job of like showing that compulsion to kill, but like also that opposite side. And again, like you said, without doing this, it's a split personality kind of thing. Like, one day I was this and I heard, and there are cases like that, but I think this was more this film was going for more of the straightforward, like how is the majority of information that we know of like how serial killers operate. And then of course, taking a comedic stance. I
think that too, I mean, we're not trying to say that murder's funny by any means with this, but I think that also the manner in which a lot of these killings happen is where the comedy is brought in, like a leg of lamb. Come on,
Yeah, but again, I think that that's a good choice, because I think if the killings were too brutal, it would be
it would take away from it.
It would take away, then we'd be going into a straightforward like either slasher film or actual like here's a serial killer movie like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer or something.
Yeah.
And I think I think Kathleen Turner's portrayal of this does that great justice of not having this split personality. Like we said, she's one character that has is functioning as this picture perfect mom and as a serial killer. And it is really hard to, I'm going to go to a clip here. We'll go to a clip with Kathleen Turner, and then we'll come back and talk about Kathleen Turner. But this is definitively one of those movies that it'd be really hard for me to picture anyone else playing this role. She just,
after seeing her in it, it's impossible.
It would be really hard for me to picture like another actor pulling this off.
And she wasn't the first one thought of.
Yeah.
We'll talk more.
Yeah, we'll talk more. We'll go to a clip and then we'll come back.
You can't wear white shoes after Labor Day.
That's not true anymore.
Yes, it is. Didn't your mother ever tell you? Now you know.
No, please. Fashion has changed.
No, it hasn't.
Are you surprised, Mr.
No comment. Beverly? When you're saying...
Here I am, honey. Beverly! I'm Suzanne Summers. Hello.
Mrs. Sutton, can we
please get a shot of you and Suzanne Summers?
Absolutely stand here, Beverly. God, would have been a nice two-shot, okay?
No, Suzanne, really, I do
Beverly,
much...
Beverly, stand right here. Okay, smile, cereal mom.
Suzanne Summers, this is my bad side.
So again, I just think Kathleen Turner is like pitch perfect in this movie. She, like I said,
Yeah.
it would be hard for me to picture after her portraying this role. Hard to picture another actress or actor doing the film. But you had mentioned earlier that she was not the first choice, or
She wasn't. She was considered, but Meryl Streep, Kathy Bates, and even Glenn Close, that we talked about from Fatal Attraction, were all considered for this movie. And I mean, you can kind of see the trajectory.
I can see, now that you mentioned those two names, like
where we're going with it is like we wanted, and John Waters even talked about like when, he signed on to do this movie, it was, the studio was like, we need a star for this. And so Kathleen Turner was settled on, and initially, she read the script, and she said that she read it. She got to, I forget which scene first she put it down at, but she put the script down. Like, I know at one part where where her character kills somebody with dropping an air conditioner unit on him, and she was like, no, I can't do this. Puts it down and then couldn't help herself and goes back to it, reads more of it, finds another death scene, and she's like, no, I can't. This is ridiculous. I can't do this. I think she talked to her husband a little bit about it and thought more about it, and then talked to John Waters, and she was like, okay, so are you approaching this movie? Is this a horror movie? What exactly is your idea for this? And so he says, okay, I'm going to come over and I'm going to talk to you. He drives the however many hours, it was like a couple hours to like go see her, talk to her. And they talked about it. And at the end of it, he's saying, this is a satire. This is not a horror movie. Yes, there are, murders in it, but it's more of a satire on true crime. It is a comedy, but you have to see the darkness within it too. And so I think this whole movie relied upon John Waters sticking to his idea for this, and Kathleen Turner really sticking behind it, because when this movie was shown to people, the studio execs that were going to approve it, that they were saying, dude, this movie is not going to fly in middle America. People are not going to know how to take this. Is this a comedy? Is this a horror movie? I don't know how this movie is going to fly. And so Kathleen Turner really tried to stick behind this, and she put her faith into John Waters, and knowing that John Waters had a huge fan base. And she had people in her life that were saying, you're an A-list actress. What are you doing with this, B movie director? And people being concerned, including the studio, about this choice in movie that you're doing. And she stuck behind him. She believed in what he said. And ultimately, the final product of this movie is exactly the vision that John Waters had and what Kathleen Turner signed on for.
And yeah, unfortunately, this is, like you were saying with the studio saying, we don't know how to pitch a movie like this to the general public.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as history goes, they were right in respects of the movie itself didn't quite catch on.
Which sucks.
Yeah, really. But Kathleen Turner did get some of the best reviews of her career. Actually kind of like a critically acclaimed movie.
Yeah.
Just didn't catch on, but eventually,
it always,
has built a following. I think a lot of like really great I don't want to say the word misunderstood, but just movies that just, they weren't easily marketable to a broad audience. And so when you have that, you just don't know how to sell it. And so it's hard to get it out.
It always boggles my mind how something, when you have a good product, can be so like bungled when it comes to marketing. And it really comes down to that marketing department or the studio just completely not understanding the movie. When you have an A-list actress like delivering an awesome performance, and everyone behind it delivering great performances too, and this wasn't like John Waters' first dive into mainstream. He had been, we've got Polyester and Hairspray and Crybaby that came before these.
Yeah.
It wasn't his first mainstream movie. Just that the marketing that the studio gave this did not hit the mark.
Yeah. I was actually just talking to, and this is on the topic, but like a little bit of a stray.
Yeah.
Justin, I was having a conversation with Justin Hayward last week.
Yeah.
Who we've had on the show.
Yeah.
We were talking about Darkman because he had never seen it, and we're both Sam Raimi fans, and that was one of Sam Raimi's films that he hadn't seen, and he was asking me about did that movie do well, and I was like, yeah, actually it was like kind of like a modest hit because and Sam Raimi has in interviews said that the marketing department didn't know how to market the film because it was sort of this strange action, weird genre blending thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't based off of like a known comic book character or anything. So someone in the marketing department just said, how about we run an ad that just says, who is Darkman? Yeah. Just make it this mystery to a public. And somehow that worked because they didn't know how to market it. So they just marketed it as like, well, we're asking you. Like, and it was enough to get people intrigued. We're like, well, who is this guy? And so it is strange how marketing can really, because that was a movie I think that probably would have failed, but they had this marketing hype. And other movies like, Blair Witch Project or like these movies where the
marketing sensation.
Yeah. And
Blair Witch Project.
And unfortunately some movies that fall into that category where they're not quite, you don't know how to quite get the information out to the public of like what this is. Ultimately, like they hear about it and like, I don't know.
And this was during a time too where we are saturated with every type of like social media, print, TV, everything that you can think of as far as marketing goes. We are inundated with it. In 1994, when this movie came out, it was still relegated to print ads, to television, to movie trailers. Yeah. And if you didn't sell a movie like this, in the right way, it might not do the best. John Waters, for all intents and purposes, like is still a B movie director, even though he has a giant cult following. And Kathleen Turner, even though she's an A-list actress, you can still have an A-list actress in a movie that's not gonna like blow up. Yeah. Especially when she is in a matronly mom role.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but too, when you have a female lead in something that's supposed to be a serial killer comedy, maybe this is just the, I don't know, feminist inside of me thinking about how that's how a woman is going to be perceived to the mass population. But like, maybe that's not going to be the strongest thing you're going to think about necessarily. You're not going to think like, what's this woman serial killer? Please. I think that it's so unfortunate how mismarketed this movie was, because I think now, like how we've already said, this movie was before its time.
Yeah.
And it really is so much. It was great when it came out, and I saw it when it came out, and I loved Kathleen Turner at the time, so it blew my mind.
Yeah.
But like now, it's better than it ever has been for me.
And man, this is what I'm talking about, man, with the movies like this, where it's like, if this is a film, like if you're listening and this is a film that you remember the trailer being like, what is this? You know, and it's something that you haven't seen. I hope that this is, again,
this is one of those we want you to go look at. We
really,
want you to watch.
This is a film that I think like, it has aged well, and like really, I think if a film is great, it finds its audience, you know, somehow. But I mean, now, yes, we are inundated with so much information. There's so many movies that have come out since 1994. Yeah. But, you know, outside of like, you know, and kind of moving this into a John Waters conversation, we both kind of agree. Like, this is, if John Waters is a name that you know of and you have been on the fence about, you know, as far as a director goes, and you're just like, I don't know, like, can
you be on the fence about John Waters? You're either on one side or the other.
But that's
really?
what I'm saying, though. I think on the fence in the sense of like, you know, you hear John Waters and you're just like, oh, I just heard he makes these just like raunchy, like shocking films.
Yeah, that's true.
This is a good introduction to how, you know, because I mean, I love John Waters, and I think John Waters is like, I think John Waters could have like a hit talk show. Like, I would.
Oh my God!
For me,
please.
John Waters is like the best director to hear talk about movies. I could listen to him just talk about movies all day long in interviews. But I think that if his notoriety sometimes, I think, like, may derail like some viewers. So it's just like, this is a film that I think like eases that
completely
person. That's what I mean by on the fence.
This was the first John Waters movie, and I mean, granted, I've maybe only shown like 2 or 3 John Waters movies to my mom, but this is what introduced my mom to John Waters, and she absolutely loves this movie. Like, granted, also she loves Kathleen Turner, but she got the humor of this. It wasn't so much just based on the lead in this movie. It was like she got the humor, and she saw like how brilliant it was, and we went on to Pecker and
but I think I guess like what I mean on the fence, like, it functions is a entry level version, but at the same time a brilliant movie. So it's just like, you're getting this great film, but then if you like this film, then like investigating,
dive a little
deeper, check out Polyester, Female Trouble, check out
Pink Flamingos.
Yeah, and Pink Flamingos it's kind of strange. It's like probably one of my least favorite John Waters films. You know, and it's one where, you know, I've seen it in midnight showing, and it's just never one that's like resonated with me. Polyester is like my favorite John Waters movie,
which was his first. I would say is his like first like mainstream movie.
Yeah,
like mainstream dive, and that was like 81. But still, it wouldn't be until 88 was Hairspray. He's definitely had mainstream movies that have persisted throughout his career. That he's gotten much larger. We know him like A Dirty Shame, and like I said, Pecker. Like, these movies, like, he's gotten more and more mainstream. With that, though, we have seen, or not necessarily his, but like the studio needing a main star, which was kind of like what happened with Serial Mom, which isn't a bad thing at all.
No, not at all. And I think that this is, in sort of like a sad way, is like, I feel like the 90s were like the last era where you could have a Hollywood studio producing sort of this offbeat film where like, just like, they're willing to invest in a smart director, in a smart script, in a concept that probably isn't going to fly with the majority of the public, but they're like, you know, we're going to take a chance on it now. And nowadays I don't think this movie could exist. I don't think that it would get made, because
you don't think Serial Mom would get made now?
Well, I this film would get made, but maybe not like a traditional John Waters film, I guess. Like, mainstream.
I think you're right. Yeah, you're right about that.
But I think, like, I feel like almost like Serial Mom, as provocative as people feel John Waters is, this film is tamed compared to any kind of Law and Order series or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
I thought you were gonna say like tame compared to a John Waters movie that predated Serial Mom.
I just mean like, if this came out now, like, yes, it would put out, but it would be on TV, but it would just be too tame for like what we're used to with
Yeah.
true crime type movies.
Yeah, because I mean that's totally, I would say, because of the comedy element. Because I don't want to downplay the violence that doesn't. I mean, it's not like it's an overly violent movie. It's like there's one violent thing that happens in these murder scenes. But yes, you were completely right. But it is the comedy that offsets these and what makes this still not offensive.
Yeah.
And makes it palatable to the masses. And I think it was a valiant effort, too, on the part of John Waters to appeal to a mass audience while not necessarily like leaving behind where he had come before at all, because there's definitely a lot of, weirdness or raunchiness that is within the movie that are those moments that you're like, oh goodness. Okay.
Right.
Well, I feel squeamishly uncomfortable right now.
Well, and the exact scene that comes to mind in this film is the woman setting down her lamb sandwich, and her dog comes over and starts licking her, and she's like super hyped up about her TV show. She like sits down. It's like you can see the excitement on her face. She's like, "My show's about to come on." She sits her sandwich down, and she like
super hyped up about what was not Little Orphan Annie. Yeah. What is it like?
She rented Annie.
Annie, yeah.
Yeah, she from the video store, and she's like super excited about watching Annie, and she like puts her feet up like in excitement. Her dog runs over and starts licking her feet. She's like, "Get them nice and wet."
Like,
and she's just
gross, dude.
It's just like, and that to me is like totally John Waters, but totally
Perfect
like the
John
moment
Waters.
where I'm just like, whoa.
Where you're more disturbed
Yeah.
at the woman saying "lick my feet, dog,"
Right.
than the fact that you're about to get bashed over the head by a leg of lamb.
And that's to me is like where John Waters works in his like, moments of like,
It's like where he slides one in, and you're just like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
it's so weird."
Yeah.
But he has, man, John Waters has the innate ability to get at you from this from this standpoint of comedy that is something you didn't even know was going to be funny, but it's almost like too awkward that you can't laugh.
Yeah. But to me it's like it's one of those moments where it's just like it's clearly like it's like a poke, It's
Yeah.
kind of like this is.
He's like, this is where I come from. Get them nice and wet. That's what she says. Get them nice and wet.
And
That's
the thing
gross.
is, it's just like because I feel like John Waters like has a way to. He has certain scenes in his movies where it's like he makes you the provocateur.
Yeah.
And this is this woman's routine, and it's like totally weird and kind of
you're
gross.
in it.
But you're like you're like forced to like be like the spy on this like woman's like her weird routine that she does.
Which in a lot of ways like happens throughout all of Serial Mom when we see her like committing these murders, and even like in a scene where she sets up strangely the only person that she that Serial Mom doesn't kill, who's played by Mink Stoll.
Let's talk a minute about Mink. We got to go to our pick of the week.
Okay.
Like quickly,
Okay.
We don't. You mentioned Mink Stoll.
I love me some Mink Stoll.
I don't want to not talk about Mink Stoll.
Well, it's interesting in Serial Mom that the only one of her victims that Kathleen Turner's character does not kill is Dottie Hinkle, who's this neighbor that pissed her off by stealing a parking spot one day, and like ever since then she's like had it out for her. But she didn't decide to kill her. She just decided to like give her the worst prank calls of her life and like harass her and like send her mail that's like obscene.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I think are the best parts of the film. Yeah. I love Mink Stoll in this. I love Mink Stoll, but I love Mink Stoll in this movie.
Yeah, Mink Stoll in this movie is fabulous.
And credit to John Waters for doing a Hollywood film and not abandoning Mink Stoll and like letting her shine, because she's a great actress, and letting her shine in this film and like giving her some quality screen time and a quality role. Yeah,
I think if you've been a fan of John Waters, to not have Mink Stoll, who's been with him forever, in this movie would have been a great absence. But it is interesting that she is the only character that Beverly Sutphin does not kill. I'll talk a little bit more about Mink Stole in my pick of the week, but I have to say that her role in this leads to some of the more quotable experiences in this movie, whether it be Kathleen Turner and Mink Stole back and forth, or
well, I think her character drives the plot a lot. Like it shows it allows the Kathleen Turner character to show her sinister side. So like
you're completely right.
It drives it, kind of anytime it involves Mink Stole, it's like we're getting a little bit more of the sinister side.
Like we are throughout this whole time that she's harassing Mink Stole, she is like killing other people.
Yeah.
But we are seeing these instances and how she keeps coming back up, and like even I mean Mink Stole shows up in the trial too. And you even see Kathleen Turner like harass her during the trial that no one else sees.
And I think Mink Stole's character is there to show how manipulative and smart Kathleen Turner's character is, because she has Mink Stole's like button.
Oh
she,
yeah,
like, knows
she's got
exactly.
her.
She knows exactly how to like
get her,
and that's maybe why she doesn't kill her. She hangs on to that card and ultimately uses it in the trial to like, so there is like a reasoning for her to stay alive.
Every single scene I think of them together, I can't help but laugh. It's like I don't know which one's funnier or if it's just them together, but it's really brilliant.
I think Mink Stole is fantastic in this, but the split screen is something. I'm a huge fan of the split screen sequence, and it was something that was like heavily used in like the 70s, but John Waters, clearly a fan, carried it on throughout most of his films. And I think this has one of the best split screen sequences, the prank phone call between Mink Stole and Kathleen Turner. Such a great sequence.
Challenge you as the listener to not rewind and watch that scene over and over again.
Just finally, again, if this is a film, if John Waters is a name that but you haven't seen his films, I'd say this is a good starting point. Yeah,
Serial Mom is a perfect beginner step, I think, into John Waters. Even though it's very far into his career, I think that it is a very good starting off point to get you kind of revved up to like what you would be prepared for in any John Waters movie. And the further you go back in his career, it's going to be a little bit more raunchy. And the further that the later you get into his career, I think it revisits that a little bit, but it's more of streamlined and mainstream. And it definitely has that element, but it's a little less art house, I should say.
Yeah, and to me, this is it's not my favorite John Waters movie, but in my personal opinion, I think it's his best film. Yeah.
I love Serial Mom, and Pecker that came right after it is a solid follow up to it too.
Yeah. Well, let's move into our picks of the week, and then we'll move into our Murray moment.
Sounds good.
So this week we kind of kept it John Waters centric ish.
Yeah.
You definitely did, and I almost went with Polyester, and then I thought it was kind of just. It's my favorite John Waters film, and I just like started thinking about it more.
I love that that's your favorite one.
Actually, my original pick was January Man, because I was kind of making comedy serial killer connection.
Yeah.
And then I rewatched it, and I was like, man, this movie really sucks. So I nixed that one, and I was going to go for Polyester, and ultimately landed on Lust in the Dust.
Which I'm so looking forward to hearing about.
That's my pick of the week. And you went with, I think I switched mine because you went with Desperate Living. Am I correct?
I did, yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to go off,
I'm looking forward to hearing about Lust in the Dust, because I've never actually seen it. But now I have your copy.
I will tell you all about it.
I can't wait to hear about it.
But let's start off with yours. Desperate Living, John Waters.
Okay, so next to Serial Mom, Pecker, and Pink Flamingos, This 1977 masterpiece, as we mentioned, Desperate Living, is by far one of my favorites. But I didn't discover this movie until much later in life, and man, does it hold my attention after multiple times seeing it. Like, I never get tired of it. But before we get into this, as we may not have really mentioned this before because Serial Mom is much more palatable to the masses, but when you watch a John Waters movie, you have to put away your, is this offensive rating scale, because it just can't apply to any of his movies. So put that away. All right. So in his earlier films, the trashiest of all the trash, many of John Waters' films starred the one and only the cross-dressing Divine. Desperate Living, however, was the only John Waters film that didn't star Divine prior to his death in 1988, but instead puts lesbians center stage. It also brought to the forefront one of my favorite actresses of all of Waters' crew that we've talked about a little bit, Mink Stole, who plays Dottie Hinkle in Serial Mom, and who gives her starring role as Peggy Gravel in Desperate Living. The movie opens with one of my favorite, which might have been my favorite section of the entire movie, which is weird to say is your favorite part of the first section of the movie. But it is Peggy Gravel having a nervous, neurotic breakdown, completely unraveling, comically overinflating everything that happens to her. It's really an astonishing opening. Her dialogue is over the top, the most exaggerated, anxiety-riddling opening I've ever seen in my whole life. I love it so much because it's too much to bear. It's brilliant and has plenty of rewindable moments for me. I don't know how many times I've just rewatched the opening. All right, so this tense anxiety scene opening escalates further when Peggy's maid, Griselda, accidentally kills Peggy's husband by sitting on him and smothering him to death. From there, the two go on the lam, and after meeting a cop with a serious underwear fetish, they end up in a town called Mortville. This is where lowlifes and criminals hang out, which is also ruled by the grotesquely oversexed Queen Carlotta, played to perfection by another John Waters casting regular, Edith Massey, who shows up in a lot of his movies. Queen Carlotta is an infantile dictator who lives to humiliate all of the subjects of Mortville. It's also important to mention that Desperate Living has some of the most truly biting commentary on the childish, ridiculous nature of fascism. It's kind of littered all throughout the movie. All right, so moving on. Peggy and Griselda shack up with Mole and Muffy, a trashy, rat-eating lesbian couple just trying to get by in town. Where the movie goes from there, you're just going to have to watch for yourself, because it's just too crazy. I can't even begin to explain. So when this movie came out, a lot of lesbian groups were enraged, claiming that it was a horrid representation. But you've got to look at the movie as a whole, the reality of the movie in its entirety. One, it's totally absurd. It's a completely absurd world. Two, John Waters hardly ever focuses on lesbian characters, although they do exist in his films, but here, lesbians and women are the focus. So it's kind of awesome, actually. This is a movie about total scumbags. No one is a great person in this movie at all. So you just kind of have to accept that reality and just move on. You can't be offended. So this film, like a lot of John Waters movies, we talk about how it's shocking or provocative. I don't feel like this movie is going for pure shock value, although there's plenty of flabbergasting moments all throughout it. But it does have a straightforward plot, and it's executed in a way that's easy to follow but kind of hard to predict. I would say that Desperate Living is true trash art. It's one of my favorite. I mean, it is my favorite of all of his. If it's your first time watching, you have no idea what to expect, nor can you really anticipate the outcome of the movie. Even though I've seen it over and over, I'm still left in disbelief at where, John Waters chooses to go with the subject matter. I absolutely love it. That could be said really for any of his films. They all end up like they're so tangential and just like kind of going on and on, but you follow the plot like when you watch it again. When this movie initially premiered in 1977, some critics completely walked out after the first 10 minutes, while others were more of the mindset of like, holy crap, you really have to see this to believe it. So, you as the viewer, I challenge you to do the same. Can you hang with this absurdist, like overly sexualized, extreme world of Mortville? If you can, I guarantee you'll want to take a shower afterwards. Do you remember this very much, Justin?
No, I'm glad that you picked Desperate Living because this is what I have to say about Desperate Living.
Yeah.
In Mink Stole is it pains me that she has sort of like not been as recognized for her performances as she has been.
Yeah.
Because I can kind of compare her performance in Desperate Living to one of my favorite performances in the film is Gena Rowland's Woman Under the Influence.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like Mink Stole's performances, a lot of times like John Waters movies, like I feel like they seem over the top, but like I feel like Mink Stole is like the Gena Rowlands of like the John Waters world, and
I can see
think
that.
she could in going back to Serial Mom, I think like she would have excelled in other films that she's a great actress, but just never really could get out of outside of get someone to take a chance on her outside of a John Waters film.
And like who knows, I don't know what Mink Stole's like idea was as far as like her acting career. As far as Desperate Living goes, like she starts off like 250%, and then like it kind of goes down like in the plot, and it's just kind of going along, and then at the end of the movie like it ramps up again. And it's obvious that it's it is the plot of the movie. It's not necessarily like Mink Stole, but like she's brilliant in her performance in anything that she does as far as John Waters goes. And it's not limited to his movies. Like she's a great actress.
And I think Desperate Living, again, like many early John Waters films, there's a lot coming at you.
Yeah.
So it's
great
like
in Pink Flamingos too.
A second viewing is usually, and that's the thing. It's like, I think like any movie that is provocative, there is that sense of like you have to get past that, and sometimes it can be. It's like I like movies that are provocative, but at the same time, upon first viewing, you kind of got to get that out of the way, and then on the second viewing is where I really enjoy them, because I can see a movie that takes me to a place that's like unordinary.
Yeah.
But now I can like focus more on the intricacies of the characters and like in how intricate this world that I'm unfamiliar with. And I think every much like John Waters to me can create a world that, if you take a movie like, for example, Fury Road, I know this is like on both ends of the spectrum, but you take this movie, this dystopian post-apocalyptic world, and there's all these little intricacies of this universe, like this is where this is taking place. John Waters to me does that on a small scale.
Totally.
He takes you into this like completely different world, and it's like you can take it for face value or you cannot, but he creates all these little things, and it's this universe, it's this world that exists, and if you can just accept that reality, you can find that there's just so much pleasure in his movies.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if that is like just like a wacky.
No, I think Desperate Living is a perfect example of that, because it is a movie that exists in this tiny little shanty town, and you really have to accept the reality of this like crappy little town. And it's something that's completely absurd. All of it it makes no sense, but in the reality of that world makes total sense. And if you can accept that, and sometimes it's hard upon first viewing, whether it be Fury Road or whether it be a John Waters movie, like if you can accept that, you can see like kind of this blossoming brilliance
Yeah.
that exists, and you're like completely engulfed by it.
And
really.
that's what I love about, and that's ultimately the thing that gets me excited about watching movies.
Yeah.
I mean, I love movies that deal with the mundane and deal with everyday life.
Sure.
But
Sure.
what gets me really excited are movies that take me to a place that I wouldn't be able to experience in my regular life.
Yeah, right?
And no one's going to take you there faster than John Waters.
You're completely right. Completely, 100%. So tell me about your pick of the week. Tell me about Lust in the Dust. I've never seen it.
Lust in the Dust is not a John Waters film,
but
almost to a level of. So John Waters was, the reason why I picked it is, number one, I think it is in the same way that we kind of mentioned Serial Mom being like, if you've never seen a John Waters film, it's a perfect introduction. I feel like Lust in the Dust is the same way if you've heard of Divine, but you've never seen one of his movies, Lust in the Dust is the perfect introduction to seeing a Divine performance. And Lust in the Dust was a Tab Hunter and Divine both starred in Polyester, which is my favorite John Waters movie. And Tab Hunter was a huge childhood star. If you don't know much about him, like kind of like an odd career, but he was one of like the last studio
heartthrobs, would you say?
Not just heartthrob, but one of the last like contracted studio players, like how they would do that in the 50s.
Sure,
like the studio would be like, you're ours for like 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So he was like from that era. But then as he got older, like did Polyester, and like you said, that was one of John Waters' first mainstream movies. Not to get too far up, I'll get back to Lust in the Dust. But Tab Hunter, this was like a passion project for him. This was like the first movie that he produced. He spent like 3 years trying to get financing, and he wanted to work with Divine again. And, you know, had this, he didn't write the film, but like had an idea of a film. It wasn't written by him, but he was pushing for this to be a movie where he could co-star with Divine again. And this movie is it's a spoof on sort of these 60s spaghetti westerns, most of which Clint Eastwood starred in, and Tab Hunter's character name in the film is Abel Wood. And his character is pretty much like, he plays it pretty much straight, like he's doing a pitch perfect homage to Clint Eastwood in the Western films that he did in the 60s. And that goes for all the other characters, other side characters in the film, which is what I think the humor in this movie comes from. Divine plays the main character, Rosie Velez, who is a wannabe singer who's trying to get to the town of Chile Verde. And of course, ultimately is saved by Tab Hunter's non-speaking, kind of quiet stranger doing his best version of Clint Eastwood. And once they get to Chile Verde, they meet. They end up. So it's kind of your basic Western plot of like everybody's has gold fever, and I don't want to spoil anything. There's a little mystery with like connecting tattoos and sibling rivalries that come up, but I'll let you watch the movie. I don't want to spoil anything I don't really care if you haven't seen it. But once they get to the town, the action really picks up. Again, a lot of this movie is played like straight Western. I grew up on Westerns. I love old Western films. And to me, that's what makes this movie funny to me, because I think, again, it fits into that semi-satire where they know when to play things straight and they know when to go for humor. And it's not really musical, but there are like several musical numbers in this. Divine giving one of the best musical performances in the film. It's a great sequence. It's a very funny sequence. You'll know it when you see it. And I do think that this was, Divine is great with physical humor, and this is a film that I think really like played to his strength of like going for physical humor and his sensibilities and performance. And so that's why I think this is the go-to, like if you've heard the name Divine, like this is the go-to film to check out. And Tab Hunter's really great. This movie was directed by Paul Bartel. They tapped John Waters to direct it, but because John Waters said he didn't want to do it. He said he didn't direct movies that he didn't write, understandably so. Paul Bartel had already kind of had several hits, indie hits, like he was a exploitation director. He did Death Race 2000, Private Parts, and then kind of had a big cult hit with Eating Raoul, which is if you haven't seen, I think is a fantastic movie. Totally bizarre.
I haven't
eventually
seen that.
One of these days I have to do that for a pick of the week. And I think that he was a perfect director for this movie. And I would hate to think that this is a movie that looks like a John Waters ripoff, because I think it stands on its own ground. One notable thing that I will say is that this is by no means, again, it's another one of those movies that could only been made in the 80s. It had like a decent budget, but it's this utterly bizarre film, genre hybrid that probably would never be made now, but shot by Paul Lohman, who he was a cinematographer for several Westerns, but he was also Robert Altman's cinematographer for a while, and did one of my all-time favorite movies, California Split. So the movie looks fantastic, and it has, though the budget was low, they really were going for an authentic sort of like B-movie Western look that you would have seen in the 60s. And again, it's played straight. It's like, it's a spoof, but they're not putting aside all these little intricacies that you would see in a Western of that era. So if you're in the tagline, one of the critic taglines, or they used it for the box, is the movie that would have made John Wayne lose his lunch. I just find that like a funny tagline to put on the box.
That's perfect.
But yeah, it's a great movie. It's funny. The movie clocks in, I think, at like 83 minutes. It moves very fast, and I think that Paul Bartel really, again, his sensibilities as being an offbeat director, finding a way to blend genres between like satire, Western, musical. Sounds like it would just be a total train wreck, but the movie just comes off to me like totally endearing and totally humorous.
Man, I can't wait to watch this movie. I can't believe I haven't seen it yet, but I really can't wait to watch it. And I'm not the biggest Western fan, but the way that you've talked about it, like, I would be into this.
And the thing is like, I think that if you had never seen a Western movie in your life, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Because it really,
that's my jam.
It puts itself into that world, and and that's the thing, is like, I think that again, with satire, like, there are going to be things that are going to be lost. Like it sort of pokes fun at several things that always happen at the end of Westerns, or always these sort of tropes, and it pokes fun at them, but it doesn't really, but a lot of the stuff they play super serious. So I think to me, that's why I think it's endearing, because it's clearly not making fun of Westerns in like a mean-spirited way. It's just, it's filled with a lot of character actors that you recognize. You're gonna watch the movie and say, "Oh man, I've seen that guy in like 50 TV shows." Or I mean, it's a movie that I think that like in the 80s like had like some studio money. They were able to get some character actors that had been in movies for like, that were sort of the veteran actors, I guess is the word you would use. And because it was actually this film didn't bomb. It was, for its budget, it made its money back, and it was actually like a moderate success. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's kind of a big deal.
It was actually like it made money. It didn't. It was like a successfve film.
That's kind of a big deal, especially for something that's like a divine movie that's non-John Waters.
So I think that like, I feel like it would have, that was like the starting point of like Divine would have gotten like bigger roles, and like people would have accepted him as like in roles that were like outside of a John Waters film.
Yeah.
And from any what I've read, he was very proud of the film, and like, wanted to do more, get closer to like a mainstream, what would be considered a mainstream film. But yeah, Lust in the Dust, check it out if you haven't heard of it, or if you haven't seen it. It's really not too hard to find. It was up on YouTube for a while, but the DVD is not hard to track down. I found a copy for $5 used at VStock.
Perfect.
They didn't pay me to say that, so there you go, be stuck.
That's awesome. Thank you for telling me about that, or telling us about that.
And I'm loaning you my copy because
yeah,
you're one of the few people I know that will actually,
Oh, I'm gonna watch it.
Give me that back.
I will. Duh.
I mean, I'm.
You know, because like I'm super honored about that because I've had movies stolen. So
yeah. Well, also too, like I see you often enough, so I can like.
I can
badger you.
What's up with that copy of
If
Less
you're never
Than
gonna,
Dust?
because sometimes you loan a movie. And if there's anybody that has known me for a long time that's listening, I'm not talking about you. But there's there's always those people that you like. They're like, oh man, it sounds awesome. They like loan a movie for you, and then like you're on like year 3, and it's like, listen, man, if you're never gonna watch it, just give me it back. And then when you're ready to watch it, then I'll loan it out to you for that 2-week period. Mm-hmm. I could do a podcast on that. But anyway.
I once loaned season 2 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer to a friend I went to college with. I graduated college about 13 years ago. Still don't have that.
And if you're listening to this podcast and you have my copy of Dancing Out Loud that you can't really get for under $50 anymore, I love it back.
Hey, and P.S., if you stole my copy of The Legend of Billie Jean on VHS, you're a jerk.
I think we should just make a segment in our podcast where we like do shout outs to like movies that we never got back.
Pretty sure that's a thing.
It's just like a memoriam of films that we loaned out and just never made their way back to our collection.
That's a real thing. We could do that.
Well, on the flip side, here's your Murray moment.
Chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
You gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand shut?
The flowing robes, the grace, all striking.
That was fun.
All right, we've been talking about John Waters this whole podcast, which has totally made my day. And you may be wondering, is it actually possible to connect Bill Murray to John Waters? Well, yeah, actually it totally is. And if you don't know it already, it's kind of been hiding in plain sight, even if you're the biggest John Waters fan. So Robert Mayer, a longtime collaborator with John Waters on more mainstream films like Hairspray and Crybaby, wrote a book a few years ago and reminded us of a tidbit that may have been overlooked upon the initial viewing of the 1981 Divine classic Polyester, which we've kind of already mentioned a little bit during the podcast. As anyone who's seen this movie knows, there are a couple of songs throughout the whole movie of Polyester. All of them are co-written by Debbie Harry, also known as Blondie, but you might not expect our guy Billy to pop up in a song. Even though he was at the height of his lounge singing act career in Saturday Night Live. But his voice does indeed show up on one song entitled The Best Thing, and it's about the main character of Francine Fishpaw finally finding love. At first, Mayer recalls that Waters was absolutely livid about the suggestion of having Billy involved with Polyester. Mayer said that Waters was not a fan of Billy, and he often bragged that he didn't even watch TV at all, in essence saying that he didn't care about Billy's career in the slightest. Waters and Billy's styles of comedy were just not in the same vein. Waters wasn't into Saturday Night Live or Caddyshack, a movie that had come out just a year prior to Polyester coming out. So, I mean, really, John Waters was subversive, underground, super gay, shocking, and even a little angry. Billy's style of comedy has never even been close to that. So, John Waters was totally concerned that if Billy got involved with this movie, that the movie might somehow become diluted. Justin, do you think we can go to a little clip of this song maybe, and we can get a little better idea of what we're dealing with here?
Yeah, I'm going to say I hadn't this is the only Murray moment where you've like let me in on what you're going to talk about.
I mean, I think...
and I didn't know about this, so yeah, I'll go to the song that you're referencing.
Okay.
We met, we spoke, our love became infinity, our timeless fantasy. One boy, one girl, deeply and honestly, our real life fantasy. The first good thing to happen to Francine.
But after this song, called The Best Thing, as we already said, was recorded, Waters ended up totally conceding that Billy's version of the song was appropriate and ultimately ended up being pretty perfect for the film. Waters is, of course, very, very proud of Polyester, the movie, and possibly the absence of Billy's like quote-unquote doofus-style comedy that Waters was previously so adverse to was what made him maybe okay with the song. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Maybe this blend of sweet vocals, sentimental music atop and, you know, over the moon montage of divine and love all ended up being exactly what the scene needed and what was warranted in the situation. I think, especially in hindsight, crossing Billy, who had mass appeal to a wide audience with a director known for his off-the-grid raunchiness, was a brilliant move for both people. But man, do I wish I could have really read the body language between like John Waters and Billy Murray when this initially happened, because I bet it would have I bet it would have really been something special.
Wow, again, like I said, Polyester is my favorite movie, but I never knew about that. Even when I was thinking about doing Polyester, when I started researching it, that didn't come up. I actually can. Oh, sorry.
No, I think it's something that a lot of people like don't even know, because it's not something that's touted in Polyester, or I think even hearing the song, it doesn't scream Bill Murray at all. Because if anything, when you hear like, you know, if you know his previous like, you know, kind of like parody lounge singer type style, or even like now into like what he does now, it's something that's kind of like in the middle. Like he's actually like singing as himself. And it strangely really fits in Polyester. So you're not like thinking, oh yeah, that's Bill Murray, of course.
It's interesting because when you first started mentioning John Waters with Bill Murray, my mind instantly went to a John Waters movie starring Bill Murray. But
God, I wish.
But the thing is like of all the interviews that I've heard John Waters talk about, John Waters is very much like he adheres to his script, like he's not improvising whatsoever.
He would not be down with Bill Murray at all.
I could easily see him like disliking Bill Murray's method.
Yeah, he was, from what I've siphoned off of this research, like John Waters and Bill Murray would not necessarily gel at all. And it's like they're both two very strong personalities and very funny people on their own, but like it probably wouldn't work. I love that it did work in this instance, but I mean, initially it probably wasn't supposed to work. But in the end,
I could leave it up to you to somehow find a way to tie Bill Murray in some sort of relevant way to John Waters.
There was another way I almost had connecting to Serial Mom, but I'm gonna hold that one close to my chest until I can siphon out the facts there.
I never doubt you. I just wait to day of, and I just assume all is.
But I mean,
happen.
This song's so great, and I have to say that, like, out of all the Bill Murray songs I've ever heard, this one in Polyester, even though I know that, like, the humor and tone of this movie, like, there's still something that, like, evokes a little bit of, like, emotion, from this. It's like not just funny. It's like I feel a little bit for Francine Fishpaw. Honestly.
Yeah. I'll probably not watch the movie the same anymore.
Never.
Yeah.
It's about an hour and 6 or 7 minutes through if you're looking for the song itself.
I just felt this was the first time that you texted me and you're like, here's what I'm doing. I was like, what's happening?
I was like, I
usually don't know.
I really want to run a clip of this through it, so we got to do that.
You didn't tell me what the Murray moment was,
I
but
didn't.
like I knew it had something to do with Polyester because you were making a request for a music clip.
I'm holding those cards close to my chest until I absolutely have to tell you.
I hope that it remains that way.
I'm trying.
Yeah, I like to be just in suspense as the audience is. So we're really pushing the limits on our time this episode. But coming up next episode, we're continuing on with our all Halloween scary movie themed movies. Next week, we'll be doing the original Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street. Then our Halloween special, Fright Night.
Fright Night. Jerry Dandridge, my love.
He is man of my dreams.
I mean, of all of our dreams, really.
So if you've been listening or just catching on, we always can't thank you enough. We've gotten a lot of kind comments over the past month or so.
Yeah, for sure. We appreciate you listening to us and checking in and sending us your feedback. Really, it means the world to us.
The thing I will say, I haven't mentioned this before, but so we've been getting some ratings on iTunes, and that really does help us out a lot. If you give us a good rating on iTunes, it will help raise awareness. It helps.
Bumps us up.
Yeah.
Maybe gets other people to listen to us.
Yeah.
We really do appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
but if you haven't been following us already, you can follow us on Instagram, Don't Push Pause Podcast. Facebook, Don't Push Pause Podcast, or visit our website, don'tpushpausepodcast.com.
We're on multiple platforms. Download us, stream us. We really would love you to rate us and give us your feedback.
And if you want to contact us directly, don'tpushpausepodcast@gmail.com. One of us will
get back to you
and say what's going on. Even if you just want to say hi. Sometimes someone just says, hey, hi, how's it going? Like the podcast.
And we also have some handcrafted movie boxes available too, where we kind of deconstruct these VHS movie boxes and handcraft them into
stained boxes with old VHS movie boxes cut out and lacquered into the wood.
Yeah, and the
makes
VHS,
for a nice storage box.
It's true. And if you'd like, the VHS actual tape is in the box. It's not completely guaranteed all the way through, but it does play.
The actual physical tape.
Yeah. If you would like this as something for yourself, souvenir, present for someone in the future, we do have these available right now. And if there's something that we don't have in stock, let us know.
And a lot of spooky movie titles for Halloween.
That's true. That's real true.
And we do these because the money that we make from these goes into helping fund the podcast and help pay for streaming services and all the things we need to keep this machine running.
And we love doing this.
Yeah.
And so we want to keep it going for you. We want to keep it going for us. We love doing this.
So yeah, if you're interested, hit us up about that. But again, thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Justin Johnson.
And I'm Lindsay Reber.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.